The Irrational Confidence Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're recapping a wild week number 5. There were upsets all over the place. But most importantly, I'm joined by a special guest right now. My normal co-host is out there with Bills Mafia. We'll find out if he went through a table this Sunday. I'm joined by our producer, Drew. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Haps, I'm living the dream. I sure hope Fresh did go through a table. I mean, I think that's part of the Bills tailgate experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be like a rite of passage. He doesn't have to light it on fire or anything like that, but at least go through a normal plastic tailgate table.
Like be the elbow drop guy, you know?
Exactly. Because then you can like pad yourself and land on something a little more comfortable than like the hard ground.
Yeah, a little bit of bruised ribs never hurt anybody.
Yeah, he'll be all right. But Fresh will be back for our week 6 preview here, ladies and gentlemen. It was a crazy weekend, Drew. We felt like we had to make sure we talked about this weekend. There were 6 total upsets out there, all starting on Friday night. FSU losing double overtime to UVA. I don't know if anyone had that one on their bingo card there, Drew. Let me ask you this. When you see a upset like Florida State, who had all of this momentum in the world from week 1 of being Alabama, does that how much does that knock them down in your eyes? Because again, this was on the road. It's on Friday night. You're off your schedule. What impact does that have with how you view the Seminoles?
Well, they were riding high, like you said, coming off the big win against Alabama, and then they blew out back-to-back cupcake matchups. So everybody's thinking they're this team, and then obviously you lay this egg on the road. Actually, probably could call this a look-ahead game since they're going up against Miami next week, and that's kind of what really disappoints me the most is we were on pace to have a Florida State-Miami top 10 matchup, both undefeated, and now the juice is kind of taken away from that game a little bit. So maybe they were looking ahead thinking Virginia, they'd be easy, should coast, get ready for next week. But yeah, it's a bummer because I would say to answer your question a little more directly, I don't think they should drop a ton. And I don't think if I'm them, I wouldn't be that worried about it because if you can come back next week and beat Miami, they'll be back in the top 10 and right back in the driver's seat for the playoff. So I would say, I don't know. I think they were 8th or something going into this week. So maybe they dropped to 15, somewhere in that range.
It's interesting because I'm super intrigued by people's perspective on this type of a loss because on paper, people will go, oh, they lost in double overtime to Virginia. Virginia's awful. Well, if you take a look, Virginia's 4-1 on the year. They're 2-0 in ACC play. And their only loss is a 4-point loss to NC State, which was somehow not a conference game. Technically, that was an out-of-conference game. But you take a look at them, is Virginia's been very, very good this year. Chandler Morris, really good player. They got Taylor, the running back, as well. I think it kind of opened up some of the questions that we had about Mike Norvell. But again, I think you kind of alluded to it, where you're looking ahead to week 6 and playing a game against a team like Miami that has been so dominant that all of the sins could be washed away if you go into next week and beat Miami.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Drew. Friday was kind of like the appetizer, the mouche-bouche on it for a weekend of amazing buffet of upsets and great games there. There's so many places to start. But I'm actually going to go to one that I know that is a little bit near and dear to you. And I know that you're probably locked into this game. And again, the social media stuff leading up to the game with Lane Kiffin, Brian Kelly, what Brian Kelly said, with Lane Kiffin's daughter dating Whit Weeks, LSU, Ole Miss. I think I owe an apology to Ole Miss, but again, I'm always intrigued. What were your takeaways from the LSU Ole Miss game?
Well, it was one of the 3 games I had on at the time, and it was the game with the least amount of scoring, which was not what I was expecting. I thought that would be the highest scoring game I was watching, and it became more of a defensive struggle in the grinded out game.
Yeah. What did you think of Nussmeier? Because I know one of the conversations that we have a group chat that goes on off air, and especially we talked about on our way down to the UCF game last week, is which of these quarterbacks are you going to be most interested to watch in the pros? And one of the answers I said was Nussmeier. And I give you a lot of credit because you do have a really good eye of that college quarterback that will translate to the pros. Did you see anything from Nussmeier that made you feel like he might be a really good NFL quarterback, or is he kind of just going to be middle of the road?
I would say this week he fell down a little bit in my standings, just sort of my projections, because I felt like if he was he hasn't elevated his team to that level. Like the offense has not looked great. And you could say playmakers aren't doing their job, or like guys aren't getting open. Maybe they don't have the talent at receiver they're used to having. But I don't know. Talent elevates. And the team, the offense has struggled every week. I know Brian Kelly got a little upset about people questioning the offense following a win, but they really haven't been able to put up many points like you would expect. And so just based on that, as we get further and further with more and more offensive duds potentially, I think unless he sort of turns it on or they open the offense up, I'm saying he's probably going to be middle of the road at this point.
Yeah. I owe an apology to the Ole Miss fan base. In our preview episode, I was starting to question whether or not they were a legit team, whether they were actually frauds in the light of Missouri from last year. I apologize. I watched a good chunk of this game, flipping back and forth between this game and the Ohio State game quite a bit. And I was impressed, especially Trinidad Chambliss, the dual threat ability that he has. He accounts for almost 400 yards by himself. Guys like that become extremely tough to handle. And I look at him and I say, maybe Ole Miss, they wanted to go with the starter, and then all of a sudden, because of injury, they found this guy who's like this diamond in the rough, and this kid can actually ball out. I've been super impressed with everything he's been able to do so far.
Yeah, he's having a good season.
Yeah. Well, let's go over to another 3:30 kickoff game here for Drew. Ohio State travels all the way out to Seattle, Washington. The first half, I don't know who had this on their bingo card, but you take a great Washington offense and what could be a possible explosive Ohio State offense, and they score 10 points in the first half combined. I don't know, but again, the Buckeye defense completely smothers the Husky offense.
Yeah, and I believe their red zone touchdowns at 0 still. Like, were they able to uphold that record? Because I saw that in the first half. Like, they put that up as Washington was in the red zone, and they held them to a field goal. And I was like, oh man. And then, because I'm thinking classic, like they put the graphic up. I'm like, here comes the first touchdown,
Right.
And they held up. And yeah, as I think about it, I don't think Washington scored a touchdown. So
they didn't. Ohio State held them to a field goal.
That Buckeyes defense is for real. But yeah, to your point, I expected this to also be a high scoring game, and a bit of a snooze fest in the first half. And the Buckeyes offense overall, just even throughout the whole game, I know they ended up with 24 points, but I just would expect it to look a little different. It almost reminds me of watching like the Philadelphia Eagles, where for the most part, they just hand the ball off, keep getting first downs consistently, put together drives, which there's nothing wrong with that. But with Jeremiah Smith, I would just expect there to be a couple of more, 30, 40 plus yard touchdowns by this time in the season.
Yeah. I'm waiting for them to really open up the playbook a little bit more for Julian Sand. But I also understand that when you go on the road, a couple of old adages, what travels in football when you go on the road, especially in an environment. People will sit there and kind of knock on Washington and say, who'd you really beat here? Washington was 3-0 going into this game, and people are forgetting that 2 years ago they played the Wolverines in the national title game. It's not like this team isn't good. There's quality players on the Washington Huskies. They just play up in Seattle, Washington, and most of their games are when most of us on the East Coast go to bed. I was impressed with Bo Jackson, though. The running back, true freshman running back. Ohio State's running game and the defense traveled very well there. I love that the kid's name is Bo Jackson. Really, his legal name is Lamar, but I'm going to call him Bo Jackson there because he looks really impressive. And the Ohio State defense, Caden Curry, 3 sacks, McDonald, 2 sacks, the 2 defensive tackles. Just, I don't know any quarterback that can handle that type of pass rush directly up the middle.
It was insane. The 1 4th and 1 sack, the guy, I think it was McDonald, got like a hand on his arm and threw him into a 360 spiral 3 or 4 yards backwards. Like just totally whipped him around. It was crazy.
Yeah. That defense is just remarkable. And it completely the opposite of what I thought this year would be like. I thought this year would be Ohio State's offense would kind of outscore everybody and let the defense kind of build up. And it's been the complete opposite where the defense has just been locked down and the offense is still kind of working their way up.
Yeah, if that offense ever starts clicking, they could really be dangerous. I know they're number 1 already, but just saying, I feel like they're beatable right now. But if that offense was able to start putting up 30 points a game, it's going to be real tough to score that much on that defense.
Exactly. So another game you said you watched a huge chunk of, and you had a real good opinion on, USC traveling to Champaign to play the Illini. I admit this result shocked me because I thought Illinois was going to have a little bit of a hangover from being completely boat raced by Indiana. But again, they clawed back and beat USC. What were your takeaways from the Illinois USC game?
Well, in the second half, I just couldn't believe it felt like neither team wanted to win the game because it was just mistake after mistake by both sides, fumbling. I think Illinois fumbled twice in the red zone about to score. The one time the guy just almost like threw it to the other team, essentially. Obviously, it got stripped while he was getting tackled. He didn't actually throw it, but it was crazy to see. And I really thought when USC scored, I couldn't believe that coming out of the 2-minute warning, they started with the throw into the end zone, like giving Illinois the time. It was like they could have just ran the ball, really started to squeeze their timeouts or do something to the clock. I guess that was what would be expected. So they kind of wanted to do the surprise play, but you got to kind of run through the scenarios, and their defense wasn't slowing Illinois down. So I had no doubt they could get into field goal range.
I'm left with the same questions about USC that we've had for the last couple of years. There's no doubt in my mind Lincoln Riley can coach offense. And Jaden Maeva is putting up stats. Again, we've seen this song and dance before, whether it was with Caleb Williams at USC or when he was over there at Oklahoma. It comes back to USC's defense can't stop anyone when it matters the most. Like the fact that you let Luke Altmaier and that Illinois offense just drive right down the field with a minute, what they say, a minute 4. I think they got the ball with a minute 47 left, something like that.
And they just handed it off and smashed them right in the mouth, right in the middle. It wasn't like they had some crazy plays. They just ran it down their throat, got in field goal range.
Yeah. And Illinois finished the job. So good job of recovering. Brett Bielema recovering there for Illinois. I always was thinking that Illinois was going to be the biggest challenge for Ohio State. But again, I'm not technically sure about that yet. But we'll get to the other big time.
Random side note, the wide receiver, number 6 for USC. Yeah, that guy, really good. I don't remember his name.
Lemon.
Yes.
Mekhi Lemon. That kid is a monster over there. He is going to be a high draft pick coming. I think first or second rounder at worst next season.
Yeah, he stood out on the field. I was like, just incredible. So anyway.
All right, Drew, let me ask you this one. Which game I want to go to? Because almost one is like kicking someone who's down. Would you rather talk about Alabama, Georgia? Would you rather talk about Oregon, Penn State?
Well, let's talk Alabama, Georgia.
Okay. Do you got...
Now...
Okay, go ahead.
I didn't make it through the entire game. I fell asleep. But even in watching, the first half, obviously Alabama was up early. Georgia came back. but Alabama obviously comes out on top. And in a roundabout way, this actually helps Florida State a little bit, because I do think there was some questions, not like downplaying the win over Alabama, obviously, but it was starting to shape up like, well, what is Alabama and what does that win really mean? So by the end of the season, that could have looked a lot different. But now Alabama might be back, you know?
I think everyone was ready to punt on Kalen DeBoer, and people forget like how great he was when he was up at Washington. Again, we talked earlier about Washington being in the national title game. I'm just wondering where this narrative is going here. Like, everyone knows Georgia has been phenomenal in the last couple of years, and it reminds me of this. It's become more and more prevalent. Like, Ryan Day and Kirby Smart are almost on like a parallel track. Everyone can say, they'll sit there and take a look at Ryan Day and point at his record against the Wolverines there.
Terrible.
It's terrible. And then we look at Kirby Smart and point at his record versus the Crimson Tide. Just as terrible. Both of them only have a single win against their. Again, Georgia's never going to say that Alabama is their main rival. But again, it's the team that, outside of 1 year, this has been the other team that has won the SEC title game. I find it fascinating that more people aren't saying, like, what is Kirby's problem with Alabama? Like, what is the bugaboo with him? Because I believe he's 1-8 now against the Tide. And again, I caught some flack a couple weeks ago because I said that I thought Gunnar Stockton was just kind of good, not great against Tennessee. I thought that they protected him quite a bit by throwing short passes, throwing bubble screens. Everyone goes, oh, look at his completion percentage. Look at his yardage for it. It's like, right. A lot of those things were done by the wide receivers. Like, again, you give me a great offensive line, let me just kind of toss it over to Jeremiah Smith or toss it out to some of these guys who can scoot, and you get out there. I could probably throw for 100 yards just by doing those little things. But again, he didn't show up there. The running game looked better for Georgia, but man, Alabama just smacked them in the mouth in this game at home.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting too, because the record you mentioned for Smart obviously carries over from the Saban era into this DeBoer era, and it's new coach, same outcome. Right. So I don't know. I don't know what it is, and I'm curious to know more so from like a Georgia fan perspective, because I know we've had this conversation as Buckeye fans. I wanted and still kind of want Ryan Day gone, especially if he loses to Michigan this year. It's like, the Natty's nice, but I mean, I'm here to beat Michigan, and that's probably. And I'm curious what other fan bases, how they would feel about that. Like, would Georgia like to beat Alabama 10 times in a row, but have a 1-loss season every year? Now with the playoff expansion, it matters less. Right. But, so just kind of curious what other fan bases think about that.
See, I think that's the only thing that can rectify losing to your rival. Like, it is the only thing out there, because there's a huge part of the fan base that is similar to, they have your perspective to it, that you only care about beating your rival, which, again, I will never diminish that. I hate losing to that team. I hate losing to the Wolverines more than anything else. At the same time, too, the only thing that can make me feel better about that happening is if my team is crowned the national champion at the end of the year. I feel like the same thing goes with Georgia, because there's only like 5 or 6 teams in the entire country that would operate with that standard. Like, it's an elite level standard right there. Like, I would say maybe Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, maybe Texas. Maybe Texas has that standard, but I think they're still creeping on there. I don't know who else I would put in that category that would have that level of standard. Like, okay, if you beat the rival, the only way it's okay to lose to your rival is if you win a national title. And there's only a handful of teams that could be in that conversation. Can you think of anyone else that would be in that group?
Not in recent years, obviously, because there hasn't been many, because I'm assuming to include them in the group, you would have to consider them a national champion contender pretty regularly.
You know, Notre Dame in there.
It's like I would have put Michigan in there if Harbaugh was still there. Like, and if
That's a
that,
good point. Yeah.
but I think as soon as he left, the expectation changed, and obviously the fallout with all the scandal and everything. But yeah, I can't really think of any teams. Maybe back in the day, it would have obviously been like Miami, Florida State. You could have made that same argument because they were both. That game was usually a matchup of two title contenders.
USC back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, USC, Texas, like you had mentioned them, they're not really back. And if we want to stay on Texas for half a second, I'm still waiting for that Arch Manning breakout game. I kept hearing he's the truth.
Right. Listen, we give you a lot of credit on this show because you said this in July to us. We're sitting around the pool one day. And again, I give you a lot of credit. You go, I don't think Arch Manning is that great because he couldn't beat out Quinn Ewers. He was a 6th or 7th round draft pick by the Dolphins. So I agree. We're all waiting for that one. I will say this. Did you see one last thing before we move on from Alabama, Georgia? Because I think that this kind of showed that Georgia is still an elite level team, but they aren't perfect anymore. And I think sometimes we expect them always to be perfect. But did you see the play that Alabama used their left tackle?
Yes.
Oh my God. Like,
yes.
Who had the chance to tackle that man?
Nobody. I saw guys bouncing off him. It was like watching a high schooler getting a peewee game.
I know. And it just happened this week that here in the state of Florida, the running back, I believe it's the running back for a bowl school, broke Derrick Henry's record for most rushing touchdowns in a football game. And that's the only thing I could think of when I saw that.
That is probably what it was like trying to tackle Derrick Henry. I mean, that guy, I don't know why more teams don't do that. I guess probably because they don't have athletic 350-pound guys that can move like that. But
Caden Proctor's a monster, man. He's going to be, wouldn't be shocked to see him be the top tackle taken in this next NFL draft.
Well, that's what he does project well for the NFL. Because I mean, I know they have a lot of big guys, but most offensive linemen in the NFL are way more athletic than you would think. And so, if he's already showing that relative to the crowd.
Yeah, he's going to be a monster. All right, Drew, let's go to the last game kind of the night. This one went into double overtime as well. Oregon going into the whiteout against Penn State. I would love to say like that this is one of those environments that someday I would love to see, but Oregon double overtime beating the Nittany Lions. James Franklin, he has 4 wins in his time against top 25 teams. He has 1 win against teams, I believe it's either top 5 or top 10. He beats everyone else, just can't win the big ones there. I don't know. What's your takeaway from how would you feel if you were a Penn State fan right now? Like, what would you be like? Cut the guy loose?
Let me ask you this, I guess, because I really don't know what is, or prior to this game, or even going into this season, let's say, what is the general fan sentiment on him? Are fans, hey, this is the year he's supposed to prove it? Because coming into this year, they were picked to be like a national title contender, one of the best rosters in college football. And, it's just more of the same from James Franklin. And at this point, I would say, yeah, I'm thinking we got to do something else. But at the same time, I guess maybe they don't look at it as we're supposed to compete every single year. So maybe it's cool that they win all but 1 or 2 games every year. That's what I don't know where their sentiment was. I would imagine it's shifted more towards we got to do something. We just can't win the big game.
If you're a Penn State fan, I think about this quite a bit. You're a Penn State fan. Think how spoiled you kind of are with coaches. Like you had Joe Pop for so many years. Again, we won't kind of relitigate what happened with Jerry Sandusky and all of that stuff. Because there's a lot of arguments on what he knew was going on, what he didn't know was going on, what he reported, what he didn't report. Again, we weren't there. We don't know on that part. You then get hit with the biggest NCAA sanctions after SMU. Bill O'Brien comes in, does better than anyone ever thought he would do. If you ever go back and look at what Bill O'Brien did at Penn State, and then you get James Franklin, who came from Vanderbilt, and they've been solid. They made the playoffs last year. I just don't know. It's a trade-off where you go, do we cut a guy who makes sure that we're in the top 10? Penn State's always going to be a top 10 team. Or do we kind of move because we take a swing at something? We may become a national title contender. I don't necessarily know if Penn State is right now. Oregon definitely is after seeing that, how that offense looked. Dante Moore was fantastic in this, and that running game was really strong against a good Penn State front four. I don't know. I would love to poll some Penn State fans to get that sense because I don't know where they kind of fall with this stuff.
I think the one thing that is potentially different about this year than prior years is they were talked about as one of the best 4 teams in college football going into the season. And so in the past, that hasn't necessarily been the case. It's been like, hey, they'll compete for the Big Ten, and they've done that. So they've met expectations to this point. So if they aren't one of the final 4 teams remaining at the end of the playoff, then I think that the sentiment's going to be, hey, we underachieved. And then that combined with all the losses in big matchups, I think you could get a groundswell started there. But at the same time, the thing that even I have to challenge on my own when I'm like, we should get rid of Ryan Day. It's like, for who? Who other than James Franklin are they going to get that's going to put him over the top? Because then if you start a whole regime change, now they're going to start recruiting differently in terms of building the team in a different way. So now you're going to have some transition period. It's just, I don't think there's any solution where it's like, hey, you're going to get rid of him, bring somebody in that maintains everything as it is and also solves the big game problem. So I think you got to just maybe give him another chance.
Yeah. And that's a great question because you take a look at someone like Oregon, who Mario Cristobal said, deuces, I'm out. And everyone thought, Oregon's going to drop off. Dan Lannings don't grow on trees. He doesn't. And you take a look at what he did with Bo Nix. You take a look at what he did with Dylan Gabriel. And even now, Dante Moore. Dante Moore was cast off at UCLA. The kid has played out of his mind. 14 touchdowns, 1 interception on the year right now. And he's got Decorian Moore, who I love this day and age that we're in right now with these true freshman wide receivers. Like last year we had Ryan Williams, we had Jeremiah Smith. This year we got Decorian Moore, who's showing like how good these true freshmen can be. And you see like Penn State wishes that they were Oregon. Like they wish they could do for what they did with Oregon. But for every time you see like the Oregon where they didn't drop off, then you take a look at a program like Oklahoma. It's taken them 4 years now to recover from Lincoln Riley leaving. So you're right. There's a great point to be made there of that balancing act.
Yeah. And it just becomes like, are you willing to risk, a 3 to 4 year downturn to try to get an extra win or two per season,
Absolutely. I'm fascinated too because that Oregon team looked really good, especially that front four that they were able to get. Plus, they also told me, I don't see it with Drew Olaro. I don't see any of the hype.
Nope. That's another one that you heard a lot about, but I don't know. Haven't seen it.
I'd rather have Dante Moore 2 times a week and twice on Sunday.
I guess the question you'd have to ask if somebody said, who do you want? And it's like, well, I don't know who's coaching them. Because it's obviously a big factor in this when you see, the night and day difference with Moore at Oregon.
Yeah, especially with Moore, it's what Lane has done where the quarterbacks. I sometimes wonder, like, someone like that would go to the NFL ever. But
Lanning?
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's on the path if he wanted to, but it's a different, thing. So we'll see.
Yeah,
it's getting. Go ahead, sir.
I'd say he'd never have the resources he has at Oregon, like with Phil Knight and Nike.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, before, it was so different in terms of like college. It used to be a lot more control and less player empowerment type of thing. And now with NIL, it's a lot more like the NFL. So I think maybe we'll see a lot more crossover going forward.
Absolutely. All right, Drew. It was an amazing week number 5. We're moving into week number 6. Fresh will be back with us again. Hopefully he survives the table drop. If we can get footage of it, I will definitely make sure to get it out there to everyone of Fresh going through a table. If he does, I will text him after this record here. Again, you guys, you've been listening to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, get notified every single time we drop a new episode. Make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com because the Irrational Confidence Podcast is part of spinnablesports.com. Like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Follow us on social medias. We're on the X, we're on Facebook. We're all over the place. So make sure you don't miss a single second of this year. Special thanks to our producer, Drew, who joined us filling in for Fresh today. Without him, none of this is possible.
Bye, y'all.